I will call the meeting for the Conservation Commission for December 4th open.
It's coming. Foil, hot foil.
While Kitty's booting up, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Who's the second? All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And we have two new public hearings tonight. The first one is for 635 Manley Street. And while he's setting up, I will read that into the record. Under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law is amended, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations, the Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing December 4th, 2018, in 6:30 p.m. in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a notice of intent filed by Jacob Driscoll's Engineering on behalf of Jared Bordiskowski for construction of a new building and replacement of an existing building at 635 Manley Street within a BVW and surrounding an upland area with replications. We're open.
All right. Driscoll, Jacob Driscoll Engineering, Hayes Group and Boston Trailer.
Thank you.
Tonight for notice of intent, as well as the groundwater, general stormwater abatement. All right, so what we're looking to do here, and this project has been before you with another engineering firm when they first built the M&M transportation building over here. And they had gone through quite a bit with some wetland replication areas over here, and the Boston trailer use as well. They did some wetland replication areas right here. They put the boulders in along the edge and back along here. This was all in a certificate of compliance that you guys was approved. So utilizing the same line and everything that's been approved previously, and then the fact that the boulders and everything are there, going ahead with what they'd like to do now, which is to get rid of this existing building here and the office trailer that's attached to that building. They want to raise those buildings, build a new building to the rear that is, I believe, 190 feet by 75
I'm
feet.
sorry, sir, I'm not able to hear a word you're saying.
Sorry. So what the project they have before you tonight is to remove the existing building, and this is a trailer servicing facility right here, and there's an office trailer attached to that building in the front. They want to raise those buildings and build a new 5-bay facility for their trailers servicing business, and this building will also have office space in this portion of the building as well. So they want to, and then there's emergency access around the back of the building. Route 24 is to the east of the site. Back here. And this is an existing paved area portion of this where this building is covering, and that access around the back is an existing paved area as well. So we're not adding any impervious area. The whole site is a compact gravel, which is basically impervious. It's a very similar curve number, and the drainage calculations to pavement. I believe I still have the pavement plan on here. Nope. We'll bring that. So there's an existing wet basin out front that's not being touched. We're showing the erosion controls in the area where work will be done, the construction exits, concrete washout areas, stockpile areas, for the general stormwater permit requirements. And that's pretty much the gist of the project.
Are you expanding the existing paved area behind the proposed building?
No, that is existing. We're not adding any more
You're
pavement.
not putting any more pavement down, or?
Part of that pavement will be covered by, if you can see where the outline of it is, will be covered by the new building. But we're keeping the existing edge of pavement back there as it is.
I was just wondering, looking at the removal of, is it just one boulder, or are you taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out along
I
that?
think we just need one. We might not even actually need to move that one to get through
Okay.
there for access, but we just want to kind of make sure that there's enough for a fire truck to get back there.
Okay. All right, John, did you have anything?
Can you describe, or can you show us where you're putting the floor drains in that building?
So the floor drains, this part of the building, right around here, is where the servicing bays will be located. So I don't have an interior plumbing plan. I do have an architectural plan
Okay,
in my
that's
file,
good
but
enough. So then,
then it'll be connected right there.
connected to what? Show me, or explain on that plan what it's being connected to.
So the drain is being connected to a typical MDC gas separator. Typical MWRA oil and gas separator. And then to a septic tank, and then to a pump chamber.
And then where does it go?
Then it goes back into where the existing pump chamber is located, because the existing pump chamber and is connected to the M&M building.
And to what?
The M&M building, M&M Transportation Building. Their sewer connects over to this pump station over here.
And then it's discharged to the septic system.
Yep.
All right, as the commission has in their report, you need to comply with the plumbing, state plumbing code, and also with DEP's tight tank requirements for floor drains. You cannot pump it to a septic system. Even with the MDC gas trap, you can't do that.
Okay.
So you need to comply with,
Industrial wastewater holding tank.
you need to comply with 248 CMR 10.09 through 10.10 and 314 CMR 18.08. That's going to require a tight tank with leak detection, double-walled.
Okay.
And so recommending to the commission that if the commission doesn't have any issue with the building being put there, and that we continue the hearing so that the plans can be updated.
Anybody, commissioners, have any more questions?
We're not adding any more impervious surface. I guess it's pretty much equal.
Yeah, this building goes away. It's all really compacted gravel or pavement out here.
Okay. Fine.
Anybody in the audience, any questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to continue to the 18th.
I'll make the motion to continue.
I'll second it.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
And could you email a copy of your report, please? Sure. Oh, you have an extra. Thanks.
The other top doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're gonna get another set.
Yeah. That paper.
For your time, everyone.
Next on the agenda, we have map 60, lot 22, South Street.
A zoo is, I know you'd be shocked, but a zoo is running late.
Okay, that's fine. We can,
We'll move on.
we will move on. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Since we don't have continued public hearings, we can go on to administrative discussions.
Oh, I hear him.
Okay,
You're up.
you're up. What I'm gonna do is read this into the record, and then I have a couple statements. So, under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law as amended, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations, the West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a notice of intent filed by Andrew Sargent on behalf of Richard Costa to build a single-family home with a septic system and draining within a BVW on map 60, lot 22, South Street. The hearing is open. And at this point, I am going to make a public announcement that I have received notification because I'm within the abutters range, and my in-laws are property owners that are abutters. So I'm going to excuse myself from this hearing and sit in the audience as a participant there until this hearing's over. So Lee gets to run this one.
Green cards?
Okay. Okay, these are the notices that were sent out, the cast that kid there.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you were gonna read the notice into.
It's already been done.
It's already been done.
Okay. All right, my name is Azure Tonero from ET Engineering. I have with me Mr. Costa and Mr. Middleton that are representing both the applicant as well as the property owner. What you have here is a notice of intent for a single-family development on the west side of South Street. I have a locus map here that kind of gives you an idea of where about the property is located. It is identified on the assessor's map as lot number 22 on map sheet number 60. It contains 28,742 square feet of land. Back in November, back in June, Mr. Sergeant from my office, my father is sitting in the audience, conducted a soil evaluation. We had Mr. Ken Thompson go out there and delineate the wetlands. There are no wetlands resources on the property itself, but we contacted the commission's office because we have noticed there were some wetlands on their abutting lands, and Mr. Delano, your agent, contacted the property owner so that we could get a permission to look at the wetlands and be able to establish the jurisdiction area within the property. So what you have here is the border and vegetative wetlands. There's a cat path that runs to the north of the property. So a series of wetlands flags are shown here, and this reddish color right here, this line establishes your 50-foot buffer line, and this cyan color, almost purple, establishes your 100-foot buffer zone, jurisdictional boundary. To the southwest will be a wetlands resource that is sort of way off the property. You can see that the 50-foot catches the corner. We surveyed the property and we located and identified the boundary corners. That's a stone wall that forms the westerly boundary, and also it runs to the north and forms the northerly boundary of the property. So what we have proposed is a single-family dwelling with our septic system. The septic system will be to the east of the proposed dwelling. It's basically a conventional, what we call a conventional septic system. It consists of a gravity discharge from the house to a 1,500-gallon septic tank into a distribution box, and that distribution box basically disperses the effluent into the field. The reason it's called a distribution box is because it meters out the effluent evenly through the distribution pipes. We have 3 distribution laterals that are proposed within the field. It includes an inspection port that allows for future inspection of the system to monitor the performance of the field. It meets Title V requirements. Town water is proposed. We went to the Board of Health. They reviewed it. They had their engineer, Mr. Cabral, I believe, review it, and the board unanimously voted approval of the septic system. Now, recognizing the amount of work that is being done, and I think it makes perfect sense, makes a good engineering sense with the current design standards and protocols. What we have also done is created a recharge, though under the Wetlands Protection Act and under your local wetlands bylaw, individual house lot development up to 4 residential units or 4 houses if you're doing a subdivision. You can do up to 4 without having to comply with the stormwater management guidelines of the DEP. However, we felt that given the site conditions and the location, and whereas there's a wetlands resource to the north west on the abutting property, we have proposed a shallow drainage swale to the north to capture water that was coming out of the driveway. And then we have also proposed a recharge trench to handle the roof runoff. And it's pretty sized. We have the details shown here so that the water will be recharged into the ground. About 50% of the leaching field is outside the 100-foot. The septic tank is entirely outside the 100-foot buffer. Half of the house is located within the space between the 50-foot and the 100. And sitting on my side, I think it makes perfect sense that the design, except for the fact that under your local bylaw, you do have a 50-foot no touch. We are not, the wetlands resources off the property, and there's a clear demarcation, if you will, between the wetlands and the property with that stone wall. And also we are proposing, though it's not required, the shallow drainage basin to offset any impacts. And the erosion control barrier will be installed throughout to stem any waterborne sediments during construction until the area is stabilized with grass lawns, and this commission issues a certificate of compliance for the work.
Where's the 50-foot no touch of?
That's one right here for the
What's the other
wetlands,
one?
that's over here, and this is the other one right here.
What's
So,
that shaded area then?
this right here,
Driveway.
this is driveway, this is the house,
So they want to put the driveway and then the swale on the
yeah,
50-foot.
and then it basically is swale.
What's the lot type? Is it all wooded or brush?
Well,
What you have to clear?
it's a scrub, it's a few trees in the on the lot, but it's easily accessible. It's heavily underbrush, if you will.
What about the
Some
50,
sort.
what about the 50-foot up north part?
There's a few trees along the
So
stone
you're
wall.
gonna have to remove those?
Not along the stone wall, we'd like to leave those.
Well, I mean, we're in the 50.
Good job.
Yes, before I read my report, I just want to mention that it's impossible to determine if the 50-foot buffer on the southerly corner there is really the 50-foot buffer without having the wetland flags off the locust property. So we're going to need to, the commission's going to need to have the locations of those flags on the southerly part. Otherwise, we can't prove out your 100-foot buffer or your 50-foot buffer.
Okay, that's
So
fine.
let's just say, for example, that your botanist was completely off base and the wetland was at the corner of that property. Then your 50-foot buffer wouldn't be right and the 100-foot buffer wouldn't be right. So we need to be able to prove that. So we're going to need those locations.
Okay, the flags are still there, so that's what I'm concerned.
Well, they should be shown on a plan.
Right, okay, we can show that, it's simply,
You can give us like
the plans,
a,
I can move some of these items out of the way.
or give us a
Show.
second sheet with
Yeah.
just the locations of the
That's
flags.
fine.
When was the flag? When
Uh,
was the flag?
Hold on, okay. It was flags, I believe, there were, oh, hold on, I've got my report under it. And it's in the packet that was submitted to you. I usually put a note on the plan, but it was flagged on September 29th, 2018.
2002?
September 29th, 2018, this year.
Oh, 18.
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah.
The second item I wanted to mention before I read my report is that there's 240 linear feet shown on the plan of wetland flags or wetland line. We don't know about the southerly part. And the applicant did not pay the delineation fee, and that would be $480 for the 120 linear feet of wetland flags on the north. So we need a check for, the commission needs a check for $480.
Okay, our office was contacted today, and I notified them, and
Thank you. And, you want me to read my report?
Yeah.
I've reviewed this filing and have come to the conclusion that if I were to offer any other comments or recommendations to the commission about this project, it would have the appearance of a conflict of interest by me. The appearance of a conflict rises from the fact that the direct abutter to this parcel are the in-laws of the commission's chairman. Since the commission's chairman is also an abutter of interest under the town's bylaw, and since the commission's chairman is one of my supervisors, I cannot participate in the hearing. If I did participate, it would appear to be to the applicant that my comments would have been influenced by the chairman. Therefore, I would recommend that the commission hire a 53G consultant who is familiar with drafting order of conditions. The 53G would be hired to review the wetland line and advise the commission on this project, including the suggested order of conditions. Therefore, I am recusing myself from providing the commission any recommendations or input on, other than what I just mentioned there, as far as the project goes.
So would I have to recuse myself because the abutters are related?
Because of what?
The abutters are related to me?
Are they? So you might have to, because you still have 3 people here that would still be a quorum, so.
Yeah.
So you better.
So I'll recuse myself from this thing too.
So
You're up.
I'll entertain a motion that we hire a
Yeah.
53G.
Hmm?
Did you just recuse yourself?
I'll second it.
Did you get that?
Try not to cough. Yes,
Did you get that,
I did.
Kitty?
Did you get the motion?
I
Nope.
Entertained a motion that we hire a 53G for the project. Ryan seconded it. All those in favor? Aye. We'll have to get a motion to continue the hearing, but we can't set a date, can we? Not really.
Got a butters. A butters.
Questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah. My name's Pat Galligan. I live at 245 South Street, approximately 2 houses down, same side. I know it's a very wet area, okay? Behind my property, when it rains, what my problem is, once construction starts and the soil starts to get moved around and elevated, that water's gonna come my way. And my other neighbor was concerned about it too. Because if it does, then, I mean, if the back of my house, I mean, even though we've had a lot of rain this year,
Mm-hmm.
it's right up to my fence.
Right.
And what's gonna happen is, if it comes in, I don't want my shed, you know, falling off either,
course
sinking
not.
into the ground. And I've also got a built-in pool.
Right.
So, I'm just, you know, if it passes, it passes.
Well, it's a notice of intent right now. There's no real firm plans, but you'll have an
I understand that. I
opportunity,
was
you'll have
just-
an opportunity to come again,
Yes, I understand. That's why I just, you know, wanted to put.
which is good. Sure, it goes on the record.
It out there. That's it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. Yes, ma'am.
June Metcalf, I live at 268 River Street, West Bridgewater.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband and I own 17.5 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And we own the side of the cart path, and then on the other side, the opposite side, the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And so my concerns are, I ask that the surrounding land be protected. I have a question, building on the land was filled. Originally, the land was a cart path. It was the original cart path from the forest behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And the land, Mr. Murray asked my father if he would move the cart path over, because my father traveled it often harvesting wood. And so my father did that. At that time, the lot was not buildable, and it was our understanding that it needed to be deeper in order to be a house lot. So my question would be, you know, the type of house that it was gonna be built there, would it be a McMansion, or would it be a house similar in size to the current houses that fit into the neighborhood? You know, might take less septic and less drainage onto the forest. And then, also, at one point, Dr. Walter Hewitson from Bridgewater State College, when it was the college, walked that property. It was a virgin forest, and he noted that there were many species in that area that are not common to this area any longer because it's a virgin forest, which is rare, and there are also fauna, etc. And so my husband and I were both awarded a forestry stewardship grant from the state. They felt that property was important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so anyways, so I hope somehow the town will help protect the surrounding land from the drainage and from the septic that might happen, and make sure that whatever comes off of that property stays on that property and that doesn't drain onto the surrounding land.
Sure.
Thank
Well,
you.
as I mentioned, 53G is a professional engineer company that we're going to hire because of the potential conflict here. All of the things you mentioned are noted, and it'll be passed on to the engineer as he's looking at this project too.
Well, just so you know, the cart path that we currently use, that piece of property was that low also.
Mm-hmm.
So it hasn't been filled up into that height, so I would hope that it wouldn't be filled any higher. And even then, it's a risk at the height that it's been put to the neighboring houses and to my property.
Sure, and all those things are considerations that will be discussed.
Thank you.
Because we don't, you asked about the size of the house, I don't think you even know, do you?
Well, no, the dimensions of the house are shown on the plan, and it's pretty consistent with the neighborhood. But I think also, just a point of information, type of a house, while it is important to look at the grading and drainage, the type of a house or style of a house is not really germane to your, and
Well,
not,
that's true.
not under your purview. So I
As
just
long
want
as
to
we're
bring that.
within the zoning.
Yeah, it is, it is. And the land conforms to zoning,
Sure.
meets the requisite frontage requirement and land space requirement.
Right.
So I just want to caution the board that type of a house, it's not under your
Sure. I
purview.
mean, we do have some work to
Yeah.
do because we're encroaching on the 50 there.
We're in it.
And I, you know, and the board, I believe, is gonna have issues with that, so.
Just keep in mind too that, as I stated earlier, and I'm sure your 53G person, whoever it is, will be attesting to that fact, that stormwater, it's not required for a single-family house lot. However, we also, as good stewards of
That's
our,
your
of our,
mitigation, is that
yeah,
what you're
as good
proposing?
stewards of our profession, have taken care to address drainage issues. I've been involved in this type of work for over 40 years.
I mean, I
We
understand.
do a lot of work in
We as a
West-
board will
Yes,
have to
do a
decide
lot of
whether
work in West
that's
Bridgewater.
sufficient mitigation or not, so. Yes, ma'am.
May I ask you just to inspect the property in the next few days and see all the water that's sitting, like in the cart path, et cetera? Just so that you have an idea of the amount of water that's there?
We're not gonna have an engineer hired that quickly, I don't believe.
Yeah, well, so I want you to take a picture.
Yeah.
Because, you
I
know,
don't think the water's
like I
gonna
said,
go
lots
anywhere
of
too
water.
fast.
Yeah, that's true, that's true.
They're gonna go nowhere too far.
I mean, it'll go step by step, there isn't gonna be any quick solution here, I don't think. Any other questions from the audience?
Just
Yes, sir.
if, for some reason, it did pass, and, you know, except, when did building, what was it predicted to start building? Did you
I
have
don't think,
any date, April, May, something like that?
Well, when all the necessary approvals, we already have the Board of Health approval.
right,
This is the last stop, if you will, and then we'll of course go to the building department
sure,
to pull the building permit.
sure.
So
Could be
I would
a few
assume,
months.
I would assume in spring.
Yeah. Yes.
Azu, could you tell me what the elevation change is from the current to the proposed house? How much fill or how high up do you plan on bringing it in?
It ranges from 3 feet to about 5.5 feet.
More?
Yes,
than what's
that's correct. Yeah, because the fact is, we're designing a gravity-fed system for the septic system. And part of the Title V requirements is that the bottom of your system has to be above 4
right.
feet above water table. So
from
we
the
have to take that into
original
consideration.
ground, before it was filled to begin with, you'll basically have 10 to 12 feet above where the natural base is,
No, because we
on
did
the
our,
forest beside it.
because we did our test pits, and those test pits were witnessed by the health agent.
Right, but
So-
the original lot was 8 or 9 feet deeper than it currently is today.
Soils.
I mean, that could be a historical information, but
If you just look around
yeah,
the stone wall, it's been filled above the stone wall that's currently there. And the
Recently,
lot to the north, the south, and the west is all 6 to 8 feet lower than the other side of the stone wall. So I'm just concerned, looking at the house across the street that's running 2 sump pumps constantly,
you get more
that,
runoff.
right, the runoff is not gonna be shedding to anywhere else, and it's contained on that lot, no more contributing to anybody further down than what's already there.
Sure.
And even though you're putting in, oh, can I say something, for the audience? Even though you're replicating or whatever you're doing with the swales and everything, you are working in the 50.
Yeah.
You gotta remember that.
that's correct.
So,
Yeah, that's
We have
correct. But I will just for point of you can take it any way you want. We would like to know ahead of time who you hire, because at the end of the day, the applicant will, or the commission doesn't pay for it, you will have to ask the applicant to pay for it.
yeah, they'll pay for it.
Right,
Yeah.
so I'm not an attorney, and I'm not in a position to be advising anybody, but I do think that if you recuse yourself, the procedure for recusal says you don't actually participate in the discussions. just for point of information.
I'm being part of the audience.
Okay, well, no, why don't you recuse yourself? Just a point of information. Help yourself. Check it out with whatever with town council or whatever. When you recuse yourself from a project, you're not supposed to be participating in that discussion. That is state law. Just a point of information to help
Can
you
you
out.
ask as a neighbor?
Yes, ma'am.
When I built my house in the town of West Bridgewater, I had to stay out of the 50-foot no touch. I was not allowed to put a
Right.
driveway in. I wasn't even allowed to put a paved driveway in the area that was out of the 50-foot no touch.
Right.
So I would expect everyone else that builds in the area to have to follow the same rules.
Certainly a big consideration. But the 53G, my understanding is we put bids. Do we bid that?
The commission picks it, and then the applicant pays it.
And is there any approval?
No, it's up to you.
Okay. But it's separate from us, a professional company and.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the same time, I think being in the practice, there should be a certain level of expectation of what it should cost. I mean, if somebody comes in here, I can tell you
Oh,
right
we'll
now,
provide
if somebody comes in here and says, oh, they want $10,000,
Oh, yeah.
we will argue against that.
We'll
We will
provide
not
you
be
with
doing
that. We'll provide you with that.
Okay, so I just think we want to be understanding here as to, yes, it's the commission's prerogative to pick who you use, but I can assure you, we know what a review fee should be.
Sure.
What a reasonable review fee should be, and if it's not reasonable, then we will not assent to that.
Of course. Any other questions at this point? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
For administrative purposes, I believe it's okay for Lee to vote on the continuance, but even though he had recused himself, I think you still need to have administrative vote to continue the hearing, since Ryan.
That was gonna be my,
Ryan left.
to entertain a motion to continue till when, though? That's the,
To the next meeting where we'll have the 53G proposal before the commission.
okay, that'll be the next step. So I'll entertain a motion that we, not postpone, continue the hearing to 2 weeks.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, can we get a date and time certain?
Next meeting.
Next
the
meeting,
12
2
12
weeks.
18? 2 weeks,
2 weeks, yeah, 12, 18, same time?
Yeah,
6:30.
Okay, thank you.
okay, you're welcome. Go back to normal procedure here. I guess for the record, our chairman's back.
Remember that when you hit the outside?
All right, next we have on the agenda 265 East Center Street, extension request.
No?
Is that something we can
somebody
address
here?
in your report, John, or?
Was there somebody here for it?
I'm not sure. Is anybody here for?
I don't think so. Out in the hall?
They did give me the money. That was a note that I had, and that's the form to sign.
Nope, they're not here. So the report that I presented outlines the issue here that the amended order of conditions was issued And the DEP regulations require that the same expiration date as the original order has to be part of the amended order. So we issued it, it leaves them about 29 days to get it completed, roughly. And that's not really fair to the applicant, so we suggested they request an extension. And I'm recommending that you extend it for a period of 2 years.
Is that the norm usually?
Well, you could do
1 to 3.
Usually 1 is
Yeah.
what we do if they've been working on it for,
Two is in the middle.
but they haven't even started it yet. And they can always come back for another extension if it takes longer than 2 years. But I think by giving them the 2-year limit, perhaps they'll speed up the process.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Second that?
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Moved. Next, we have on the agenda 1 Ames Drive regarding discussion of these special conditions. Good evening.
Mr. Adams wanted to appear before the commission tonight to discuss the special conditions that requires conservation markers, conservation easement, access easement, so et cetera.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay. When we had our hearing, I had agreed, and we had some discussion on the access easement, and I said that I would not give a full access easement or a deed restriction on the property because it would devalue the property. I said, however, what I would give is a pathway, a 5-foot pathway up the property line, starting at the beginning over here, all the way up to the corner. I also said on the other end of the other cul-de-sac, I would give you the same going up the back 5 foot all the way up into the opposite corner. So that's what I agreed to, and that's what I thought we were doing. When I got my order of conditions, it has a complete easement that that instead of just taking this pathway up both ends, it takes 5 acres out of the 5.4 acres. It makes it so to me, there's no value to it. So I can't live with that, and I can live with what I agreed to, and I thought we were on the same page, because I went through all the minutes and all the videos, and after I had said that, there was no disputing it or no change to it. We didn't have any other discussions about having a full easement. I don't know if the plan on here that shows.
Trying to access something else.
So this is,
Right.
Yeah.
Now, is it the access easement you have problems with, or the restriction on the,
I have problems with this. That is what is written in my order of conditions. That leaves 18,000 square feet for the house. This is encompassing upland area that's in here and over in here and all around. I never agreed to that. I wouldn't have, and I also said to the board, if that's what you have to have, you might as well shoot it down now. That was a long time ago. This is what I did agree to, which is an easement up here, around here, and what I didn't want to have, I didn't want someone looking at this property and buying this property and having conservation agents walking all over their property within, 50 feet, 100 feet from their house. That's to me, that's a land taking, this here. I agreed, we didn't even discuss this other side, I threw that in, and I gave an easement here to walk all the way up into the back, so you can look at that whole area, and you can walk down here and up here, and you never go in contact with the house. But you can look at the land, and I don't know what the purpose of that easement was to begin with, other than to look at it to make sure whatever is going on there is correct. I'm not sure what that easement is for. But what we've written up and what we agreed to are two different things.
Were we trying to act? Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Bill, you say you reviewed the minutes.
Yes.
Do you have a copy of these minutes?
I don't have them with me, but I have the minutes. I went all the way back to,
So where did you obtain these minutes from?
online. I went online.
Okay. So these are from the minutes, and
Yeah.
I went through them and underlined certain parts of the minutes.
Yeah.
So back in April 18th, 2017, you appeared before the commission for an informal discussion with Mike Koska, the engineer. You talked about a proposal showing a house in the 50-foot no-touch zone. And this is new construction on basically an undeveloped lot. And you made, or tried to make a case that, that the man-made ditch that runs along the property that is a wetland restricts your ability to be able to put a house on the property. So you needed some relief from that 50-foot no-touch, no disturb. Otherwise you couldn't put your house in there.
Can I say something also?
Oh, let me,
All right, go read it, okay.
so, you were told to submit a notice of intent, and that's what the minutes say. So then on September 5th, 2017, still an informal discussion, you came into the meeting and introduced the idea of a proposed home on the rear of the remaining lot. Mr. Ames is willing to give an easement or donate some of the property that is marked with small WL/UL if he can have a grass yard on one side of the dwelling. Mr. Adams put the swale in when he built Ames Drive. JD recommends, that's me, recommends that Mr. Adams file a more detailed plan with how much area would be in the modest yard and how much would be in a permanent easement.
All right. Can I
The driveway.
interrupt for a minute?
Sure, go ahead.
The reason I want to, before we get too far ahead of it, back in April of 2017, the minutes of April 2017 do not reflect the video. The video talked about, and we had a discussion about the drainage ditch, and you looked at it, and you said on that video that it was hardly a wetland area and more of a drainage ditch than anything else. And then Mr. McCarthy said, if that's the case, why don't you just fill it in? And then, John, you said, I don't want to fill it in because it connects two resource areas, one above and one below. So I'd like to keep it the way it was. So at that point, it wasn't much of a wetland area, and I was, it was causing me problems when it was hardly a wetland area. It was a drainage ditch that I put in, that I created. And at that point, you made that statement. Minutes later, down the road, you didn't remember that, and you said you didn't remember that statement. This,
Minutes down the road when?
at some other minutes, when I asked you, the videos have a lot more detail than the minutes do. I read all the minutes all the way back to 2017. I watched all the videos all the way back.
Okay.
So the videos have a different picture than what was actually on the actual minutes. Some of the conversations aren't there, but they are there in video. If this isn't that critical of an error, or wasn't in the beginning, then why are we doing this versus what I agreed to? And in the other meetings going forward, there's a couple of the next meetings that you can read, and it talks about a trail, which I thought was the path that I was talking about. I called it a path, you called it a trail. So if you want to continue reading the minutes, you can, but we had two meetings after that we discussed it being a 5-foot path up the sideline, and I said I'd bring it all the way to the back of the property. So, after that.
So basically you're saying that the official record of the commission is the minutes that get approved at the meetings. that you're suggesting that the video is the true minutes of the meeting?
No, I'm suggesting that the details that were actually in the video, a lot of them are left out on the minutes. Maybe they felt they weren't important, but they are important to the conversation we're having and what had happened. You know, what I believed and what I thought, and how the meeting went. So if the minutes don't reflect, I mean, at one point it says, you know, Mr. Adams was dismayed by the information, but it doesn't say what I was dismayed over. It doesn't say anything about what I know when I first came in, I was upset because we had already gone through this whole exercise in 2004. And I thought that I could I don't think that meeting was ever closed, but I agreed to file again and pay a second time to go through this whole process, and I kind of let that go by the wayside. That was the first meetings that we had, and I was upset over that, and I remember that. And that's not in any of the meetings that I found. So there's a lot, you know, and I'm not sure that that's critical. Maybe you just take the critical points of the meeting, but it's important to me because that's what I was making the statement on.
John,
And that's what I based my information on.
does this have anything to do before the house was moved, or after?
Well, as you recall, the first proposals by Casca kind of had a house that ran basically parallel with the back line. So that the lengthwise of the house was parallel with the back line, and Mr. Adams did not like that because he said that you couldn't really see the full
The front door.
vista of the house or what the house would look like from that direction. So he wanted to turn it, so he came in with Mr. Reiblin and presented another house that really encroached into the 50-foot buffer. And the commission rejected that proposal and sent him back to modify the house, still leaving it 90 degrees now to the back line, so that he could get his full view of the house when he came in through the driveway. But you did say that in, I think, the reports that are attached to the minutes that I wrote indicate that he's to restrict those areas as mitigation for allowing him to encroach in the 50-foot no-touch.
I always thought there was gonna be a restriction on the property. To the extent or size of it, that was gonna be determined, but I thought there was always gonna be a restriction put onto it. I didn't know that was off the table when you offered to just do the 5-foot pathway
I said
around.
a 5-foot access easement going up both ends. And I said you'll be starting out at the road, the beginning of the road, so you wouldn't be walking by. The way it has it right now, this goes right at the center of the road and right by the house. The house is right here. So it goes right up there and goes in. So that was never.
At this point, if he's concerned with people accessing it, I wouldn't have a problem taking the access easement off and leaving the rest of the restriction on the property.
I mean, this makes this lot invaluable, devalued to me.
Well, it wasn't one before.
It's always been a lot.
No,
It
I
was an
mean,
approved
it
lot.
wasn't buildable under the town's bylaw, that you couldn't build it unless you did what Mr. Casca showed, which is, and I don't even know if that fit, but.
That didn't fit either. That didn't fit either.
That's right, so
Neither one of them fit.
you're bolstering my argument that you didn't have anything to start
Well,
with.
it
You had a piece of
depends
land.
on the drainage ditch. If the drainage ditch is a drainage ditch and not a wetlands,
And the
then I've got
the
plenty of
previous
room.
commission determined it was a wetland, and this commission did. They just said that it wasn't that important not to grant you some type of relief. But in order to grant you the relief, you had to give up something yourself, and that's why,
Right.
that's.
That's why I was given that easement up the
Yeah.
sideline.
Boy, that's really not gonna help.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna do this, so we
Okay.
have to determine
So-
what we're gonna do. If you wanna withdraw the,
Did we issue an order of
Yeah,
conditions?
we issued-
Now, can you, and this is the first time I've seen this, can you go back and change I guess you can, right?
You can amend it.
Amend it, yeah,
yeah.
because
I
our,
I have no problem with amending it in doing that, but if we're gonna
But you
end up
don't
with
want a
this.
restriction on any of that.
I don't mind.
Except for the 5 foot.
I can't have a deed restriction on the property because it hinders the price of the lot.
Can they use any of that?
But we're allowing you.
Can the owner?
Can the
do
owner
anything
use
with
any of that?
Right.
How much?
Is what?
How much of it is usable upland space that they have access and can get to?
How much is usable? About an acre and a half? And you're giving me 18,000 square feet, which is a half an
And they
acre.
can gain access to that acre and a half without going or encroaching on a wetland.
They have to cross the culvert to get in. They have to go over a culvert to get in, which is
That's a wetland.
So,
yeah,
by the way,
what they call it. If I have to, I'll go back and bring a botanist back in and have them flag that. I accepted that drainage into the wetlands because I was told it was no big deal and we can work around it. But that clearly isn't the case.
I guess our point is that we're trying to protect an area that they might be sorely tempted to expand into because they want a bigger.
Well, with this
yard.
though, you can't even use the area. The areas that we've encroached, this here is all upland in the back. And what we did was we made the line along the hay bale line instead of out here where the wetlands are. I don't have a plan that's, I mean, this is the back of the hay bale line here.
Was
This
that
is-
part of the
that's
mitigation?
upland.
That's all upland.
That's just the back of the hay.
So that's buildable up back there if you wanted to. Is that what you're
If I
saying?
could get to it somehow,
How can you get to it?
oh, if I could, I'm saying.
So, I mean, if you could, how would you get to it? What do you mean by if you could? You have to cross something?
No, if that area, I've included it all as one lot. I had 6 house lots.
Right.
And I've cut 6 house lots down to 1. And I'm asking for access for 1 house lot, and I'm not asking for this.
John, if we were to go and redo this and call the 50-foot in the upland, or let me rephrase that, the 50-foot and all the wetlands with a restriction as the mitigation, so that we're protecting the wetlands and the new landowner will know that that is a no-touch deeded restriction, which we've done on other properties within town, which we've had issues where we're not going to be monitoring this, we're not going to go look at this, we're not going to watch it. 5 years from now, there could be a 3-acre site out there cleared and horse pastures everywhere, or cows or whatever. Having the restriction on it gives us that oversight. I'd be willing to go back and look at it and say, okay, we'll give you the mitigation part in consideration of the restriction, but give you a little more of the upland parcel of it. I mean,
Because you gotta protect
so
it.
could I see that plan, Bill?
So after, just say,
How much of
This
the
house gets
50
built,
did we
you
allow
sell it,
to build in?
because you're gonna be selling it, right? It's gonna be
Yeah,
something
well,
that,
I'm
So
gonna
we're
try
gonna
to
give some.
market it and sell it, yes.
okay, so you will have nothing to do with it after that.
After
won't have
that, would be a
anything to do with you.
homeowner would have it, would be there.
So you won't have any problems, you won't have anything, issues to do it. So we're gonna have to deal with the homeowner if they take action to do something like Tim said. They decide to clear something, so we're just protecting what is out there for us as the town and for the people surrounding the area.
Right, but
You, once you sell it, you're done with it. You could care less what happens a year from now, because it won't have anything to do. If it comes back on
a
you,
wetland line,
but if it come back on you a year from now, saying that you, we're gonna have to somehow get fined for clearing that property,
putting
what
a,
would you do?
putting a deed restriction
Yeah.
on a property line, on a wetland line, wetland lines are not stationary. You might have a wet year like we're having this year, and it could grow. You may have a dry season, and it could shrink. What you're saying is, the line is the line that's carved in stone,
Well, you can
That's what it's
determine
flagged
that.
for.
You can
that could be
determine
done by
right?
soil
By a
analysis.
deed, by a restriction.
But it can be
Deed
done like by
restrictions,
soil.
Wetlands
They,
is
the
mentioned
board
by
might
law.
like deed restrictions, but homeowners don't and builders don't.
But when you go to dig, you
Hydrology
tell by
tells you whether
the
it's
soils.
wetlands.
Yes, you can tell
not by
by the
a
soil.
stream that's there
Right.
this
Not by
year,
the
or could be
water,
moved
right.
next year.
You can tell by
It's
the
soil.
elevation, you can tell by the soils, you can tell by the vegetation.
So if the,
It
if
isn't
it's marked,
all
it's marked, and
vegetation.
that's
Yeah, but
what
if
it
you
is.
have a deed restriction that's on the deed, you can't, he'd have to go back for a hearing again and say, hey, the line is moved, now it's over there, and start all over again. And have another hearing.
So, I've got a suggestion. His plans that he submitted, and Frank Rybelin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, do not show all of the wetland lines on the plans of record for
Even
for this site.
Yeah.
So, he could ask for an amended order of conditions. He could flag some more of that land up in this area here. Up in here, because you're only stopping right here.
Right. It's
We
flagged now.
we need to know the rest of this so
Yeah.
that we know where the 50-foot buffer goes.
Yeah.
And if the commission were to go along with what Tim had recommended, so if,
This is the flagging that was originally approved. So
Yeah.
that is flagged
we
there.
we haven't got
That's a
that
given.
plan.
I mean, if you're not gonna put
This
it,
plan was
you're not
done
gonna
in
put in a restriction.
2017.
If you put the restriction, I don't.
And it's never been submitted.
Why couldn't you do both?
Yes, sir, that's the plan they accepted the line on.
No,
Hmm? How about a fence?
the only thing we have in our file is Rybelin plans. Is that a Rybelin?
This was Costa.
So that was an informal
No,
discussion.
so what happened was what Costa did was, this was flagged in 2004, and then it was flagged again and accepted again in 2017. In July 31st.
No. This was all informal discussion. So the only official lines that were approved was what Frank Rybelin submitted as a notice of intent. You're saying that the commission approved that in
This
2007?
line is on the Costa plan that was submitted in the beginning, and Frank took it over.
And it was never approved. It was all informal discussion. You have, in order to get the commission to vote on something, it has to be submitted as a
Okay,
notice
but
of
that
intent.
gives you an idea of how much upland there is behind
Okay.
it.
So
If
what,
it- If it's accurate.
so what Mr.
If it's accurate.
So
Yeah,
what Mr. Hay
I believe
is
it.
suggesting is that if you want to amend the order of conditions and the commission agrees, they will restrict on this. First of all, they have to accept this as the wetland line.
Yeah.
And then your surveyor is going to have to show the 50-foot buffer here, and they will restrict the 50-foot buffer and give you back any of this that you could possibly have. If there's nothing there, you're not getting it.
Right.
But you're implying that, that there's some additional buildable land in here, or.
Well,
Upland.
Let's call it upland.
Expandable.
Let's call it upland.
Expandable.
Yes.
And we don't know that, so we have no plans to show that. But if you want to go through that process, you can do that. And then the commission could entertain Mr. Hayes' idea of,
But if you're not willing to give a restriction on the
Deed restriction.
deed restriction, then my only other choice would be to put wetland flags along the 50-foot every 20 feet
the wetland
on the
signs.
entire property,
You have
on the entire property.
Not flags.
poles.
That's-
Poles,
The
posts, and
and the
markers,
signs.
You have
every 20
poles.
feet around the entire property.
Not just
No,
the
this-
house
I
area.
don't think there's any poles now.
There's
There's-
poles on the approval now.
Right.
They're-
Around, the
Oh,
The house.
yeah.
right, around the house lot,
The house lot.
right.
This is gonna be for the entire property, yeah.
And I just want to,
Like I said, you wanna protect it from.
right, I mean, I don't want to have to go like we've had to 3 times already this year with homeowners that have bought property
And done stuff.
We've got a
and
list
done
of them.
something after the developer and the landowner have walked away from it, not knowing that they have wetlands on their property that they have to deal with.
Don't they get, when they buy a property, they get, everybody I sell a property to, I give them as-built, I give them wetland lines, I give them the whole
They don't
package.
interpret.
You do that to the first one, and who's the second one or the third one, a year and a half or 2 years down the line, it doesn't follow it.
Even with the
Yeah.
easement, they don't know, right?
But we've
It's
got
on
the
the
teeth
deed.
in it
We
then
did it
that we
on
can
a
go
deed.
back and say, buyer beware, you didn't do it. Just because it's in our bylaw, doesn't mean anybody reads the bylaw. If it's on a deed restriction and it's there, they buy the property, then they know there is something they have to watch out for going forward.
And if they don't know,
If
they
they
should have
will.
known.
Right, they should have known, and their lawyer, they can go back and talk to their realtor and their lawyer and say, somebody didn't represent me right, and
It's happening more and more. I mean, it's really picking up pace where
Right.
people are just doing what they want and they're in violation.
Considering that we've had so much rain, people are like, I don't want this water coming, so they're taking action on themselves, for themselves to do something with their property, and they're not supposed to touch certain areas of it, and they're just doing it.
But we have There's an option here, as John.
So I think in order to exercise that option and consider that, you need to submit a plan that the commission can vote on formally, not a Casca plan that was informally submitted. Show the 50-foot buffers and show a conservation easement between the wetland lines and the 50-foot buffer on the rest of the lot, and not show the access trail easement.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna, then if I'm gonna bring a botanist in to flag that back area, then I'll have them check that drainage ditch to also.
Yep, and
If it-
we'll.
if it turns out that
if
it's
that's-
not-
If that's the case, then we'll require an ANRAD to have the flags reviewed and the delineation fee that goes with it, so.
Right, okay. All right, you wanna hang on to these, or you wanna,
I've got a copy.
Just one copy's fine, thanks.
you want this one, Jim?
Yeah, I'll take it.
That's the other.
So I guess he'll call up and we'll schedule it, yeah.
Okay,
all right, so once you get that done, we'll figure out where that really is and
okay,
go from there.
all right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
Next on our agenda, we have
That's the one on the wetland zone?
This gentleman back here.
I have it on file, too, somewhere.
Want to jump right to this one so that he doesn't have to keep his, thank you,
Kids here, yeah.
so he can get his kids home.
They've been really good.
They've been
They've been very patient.
really good kids.
Are you here for?
55.
Is this 55 Crescent Street?
Yeah.
No, this
No?
is about Scotland Street, 143 Scotland Street.
Scotland Street.
Oh, okay, so this is back to 153 Scotland
One-
Street, okay.
You're at 143.
You're at 143?
143, I'm 143. yes.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
the new owner of the house.
Okay.
The victim house, basically.
Okay,
Oh, the
sorry
one that's all
about that.
filled
yeah.
in? The one that got filled in?
The one that filled in with
Okay.
water, yes.
Alright.
And
Oh, they sold it.
So you're,
What? They sold it?
so,
I'm the new, yeah, I'm.
so
the
are you
owner.
buying it from Donna?
I believe her name is Donna, yes.
Oh, the-
Okay,
Oh, you're the
The
new
couple that were
owner.
here?
yeah,
The couple that were here?
you just,
Yes.
you're under agreement or something now, is that what?
Yes, the house is pending,
Oh,
and I
alright.
called the town, and when I talked to her about the water, she told me to call them with the town hall and check with them. I did call, I
Okay.
talked to someone, and they told me there is a conservative meeting on Tuesday if you
It's a
would
good,
recommend you to attend.
good idea.
So that's
Alright.
why I showed up tonight.
You wanna go ahead and give the report?
Yes.
So the
It is.
next door
I just wanted to
neighbor
make sure
at
it was the right-
153
Yes.
It is, okay.
has an enforcement order from this commission that says he's got to correct the problems with the drainage out there that affects the parcel of land between you and 153. So there's ponding of water that occurs there.
Yes,
He's got to correct that, he's got to correct the grades out back so that it doesn't pond up water. And he's in the process of getting an engineer to draw up the plans so that we can approve them, so he can correct it. So it'll probably be in the springtime before that happens.
So there is no timeline for him to finish to get that done.
Well, he won't get approved until he comes up with a plan. And the plan would have to be put into effect when you can grow grass, so that would be the spring. So it'll be like that over the course of the winter, but then it'll get corrected. So you would have a temporary view of the unfinished product out back of him. But it won't be that way forever, it's gonna be corrected.
Okay.
Did you survey? I mean, you're not, are you at that point where you surveyed?
No, not yet, but that will be, thank you.
Is the issue of the
So
trees and all
my
that,
main
yeah.
concern is that because the ditch is kind of deep now with
Yeah.
the water filling.
Yeah.
So my concern is when I move in, you know, in January 11, by the closing date or whatever, the kids, you know,
Yeah.
kids will be kids, so they're excited and will be running around and someone will fill in that water. That's my main concern. So if there's anything, I don't want to create enemies from the beginning. We're trying to, you know,
Sure.
this is my first
Right. That's,
home and trying to be, you know,
Good
but
neighbor.
I'm trying to protect the kids though, so I don't want incident and then I say sorry. I want to be
Yeah.
safe than sorry.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind
That's a
of
good
try
point.
to follow up on this before something happened.
what we're hoping is that by next spring, he's got an improved plan, and if the weather's good through the winter, he can do the work and get it fixed and get the drainage taken care of. Fine, if not, by next spring, that it will be taken care of and that water will be drained and not
We talking
puddling.
April, May.
More than likely, April or May is,
Okay.
it's, I mean, that's what we're pushing for, and we're really,
Okay.
How deep is that water?
It's when there is rain and stuff, it's deep.
yeah,
I mean, do we
it's
have a
feet. It's,
Potential
Yeah.
safety issue with these children?
So maybe.
That's my main concern.
Yeah.
is the
Right.
Safety issue. You know, just
So maybe as part of the approval of the final plan, that temporarily he put, the next door neighbor puts up the orange safety fencing to
yeah,
prevent,
something to,
prevent his kids.
yeah, the 3-foot snow fencing type,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, not just a strip
So-
of
Right.
tape, but.
That might be a,
Isn't there,
I honestly, to be honest with you, like if it's gonna be done by April, I don't want him cost him a lot of money to fix it or put something temporarily that will make him hate me. So I don't want to do that. I want it if it's under control and he'll be taking care of it by the spring, then we'll try to be, you know.
right, but we want to, I mean, you've got little kids, and kids are going to play in puddles, play in water.
That is
And
true. That's true.
I don't want to see a hazard here, like John said. If
Yeah.
an easy way out might be putting up the
And
3-foot
that's not
safety
expensive.
fence
Right. It's
Yeah.
not
on that
expensive.
side of it around and wrap it
Just
so
run
that,
it around so the kids can't
So they
get into
beware.
it.
right, I mean, 3-foot high would be enough to,
Yeah.
Okay.
is a deterrent. I mean, it's an easy fix.
Right.
this is something that shouldn't happen, we want it fixed, and he knows
It has
that.
to be fixed.
It's gonna be fixed and it will be fixed,
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
All right. Appreciate it.
come anytime. 'Cause this'll be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're
So-
uncomfortable, anytime, come on in and ask.
So anytime it's on the agenda, you feel free to come in, and by the way, your boys are very well behaved.
Thank you. Thank you. I give them a listen my way. Take it down.
Welcome to West Bridgewater.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet
Yes.
you all. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Really.
Speaking
Bye,
of this,
boys.
though,
Speaking
did we
of
get
survey,
an engineer
If I
hired?
wanted
No.
to get
Did we
like
get anything?
a survey of the land, how much does that cost you to?
Depends on the surveyors that you go to, but you'd have to consider it somewhere between probably $900 to $2,000.
Okay, and I come to the town for this?
No, you'd have to
Hire
hire somebody from the Yellow Pages, the
Oh,
internet.
okay.
When-
Yellow
Really?
Pages. Who knows the Yellow Pages?
Today.
Yeah.
Internet is probably the
That's
best place.
Hasn't been able to
Just
find
Google
someone.
Google it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye,
boys.
boys.
Bye, boys.
Nice having you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, John, after seeing that email that came in, and I mean, we knew that there was the holiday, but knowing that we have December holidays and everything else, does the 18th look like a reasonable time to have something?
I would think so, because,
I mean,
Gotta move it along.
yeah, we can't just, especially now, I mean, it's gonna become a safety,
it doesn't necessarily require that they start the work. So
Right.
most engineering companies could free up someone to go take a look at the site, work out a proposal that we will do your work for X number of dollars.
Right,
And that's all you're asking for at this point.
right.
You may ask for some additional milestones to be set so that you can keep the project rolling and it
Right.
doesn't get put off till August of next year. But I think it's fair to say that by the 18th, that any number of different engineering companies could get somebody out to take a look at it. Not even going out to it, go on Google Earth, take all the mapping online and say, yeah, we can do that for this price. So that doesn't necessarily mean that all those prices are gonna be agreeable to the owner of 153, but that, they're gonna have to figure that one out and take the best,
Because it's been 2 weeks already.
yeah.
And I mean, we don't know what spring's gonna bring. I mean, we've had almost 2 feet of rain in the past 3 months.
You don't know how long winter's gonna last either. do you?
Right.
So-
I mean, it may not freeze up, it may freeze up. You may end up with 6 feet of water out there.
I've been
I
seeing a lot of trees in the wetlands just topple over because they can't, there's nothing to hold them in, and the soil is just so saturated.
No, they were saying it's supposed to be a long winter, kind of a wet one, but a long one stretching out, so that could go into
Another
that,
crappy spring.
maybe. So,
You know, when that lady mentioned that she had to stay out of the 50-foot, one of the abutters, that to me is becoming important because
Sure it is.
the mitigating, with all this, with him, mitigating for him, and then her sitting there, stating that nobody let her into the 50-foot. I'm really rethinking all that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I really-
and that's when I said.
I think it's time to get a little more rigid
To a
about that.
TIF, I mean, he's looking to do a mitigation, or whatever, to help put in swales or whatever the heck he's doing.
Right,
But he's working in the 50.
right.
I mean,
I mean, as
It's
Lee
not
said
right.
before, we're putting in houses and driveways and
Right.
pools and patios and decks and all this impervious area that the water's gotta go somewhere.
Right.
It's not staying on your property, it's
No.
going to somebody else's when we build,
I'm with you, Paul.
Yeah,
We've
I'm
held
just,
a
I
pretty
think
rigid
it's,
line.
yeah, I mean.
when we put 8
You-
feet of fill into a site
to tell you
and
the
it's
truth,
gotta drain
Right.
somewhere and it's not staying on that
to tell you
property.
the truth, in my opinion, when I saw that, I
Yeah.
was like,
That's how I felt too.
no,
Doesn't look
it's not
good.
gonna, no,
I can't see, it's not looking fair
it's not working.
To-
Yeah,
to get something minor and let them, but not somebody else. It's not fair. So it's gonna be a problem for me. That one is gonna be a problem for me. If it's in the 50-foot, I'm gonna have a
The
problem. with it.
mitigation didn't, I guess I'd have to ask John at some point along the way
You
here
said you
whether
have
that
an email right
was
there.
sufficient. It didn't strike me
Is
as
that
being
up?
very
Yes.
sufficient,
Right.
but,
Is that on Mulligan?
I don't know.
Oh, all right.
You keep that
that
one.
he was gonna
I can keep
Yeah.
this?
adhere
Okay.
to the over 4.
and.
Well, I think as long as the commission is consistent with their decisions, and that doesn't mean you have to be the same, no 50-foot disturbance
Right.
whatsoever, but consistent with protecting it and also being fair if there's alternatives being suggested.
Right.
And tonight you just demonstrated some fairness when originally, the reason why he talked about a trail was he realized we needed to have access to the rear land. So he said, well, I'll give you a 5-foot all the way around the sides of it. Well, that's fine, but it really doesn't accomplish what we were looking for. And so he understood that amount of it.
Plus, his
but-
concern with conservation was gonna be traipsing around, and we don't traipse.
No, the
It's
conservation
nothing to look at.
wording in the easement, wording of the easement does say that with due notice, we just don't go traipsing.
Right.
Although the access easement was a little different story, that was specifically to be able to walk through there.
Right.
And if you recall,
Who
I
would
think
be
I remember him
walking
saying,
through?
so long as it wasn't close enough to be looking in people's
Very
windows or
few
something.
people.
But I
Not
don't know
me.
if that was him or
Yeah.
not.
we weren't really gonna be walking around the house, it was
Yeah, I
gonna,
know.
Right.
down the driveway, into the wetland, and along the wetland to the rear, which was a very short distance, so.
Yeah.
If there's any other problems, I think we should stick with that one right there.
So he, from what I could understand, is that he wants to cross that little culvert. And if he can't cross that, he can't build.
Right.
And I
So
don't-
we have to give him that.
And I
he's-
don't, yeah, and I don't remember him saying there was any more farther upland.
There really isn't much
Yeah.
up there,
But I don't remember him saying that.
and that's why they didn't show it on the plan,
Yeah,
but the
'cause-
point
Yeah.
that I was trying to make is that you're willing to compromise, you're willing to look at each case by case, and as long as you continue to do that, it's not arbitrary and capricious. and therefore you're not, anybody can say they want to take you to court, but you at least are on good, firm grounds that you're not acting out of the ordinary.
So if we were to get an idea of how, if we're gonna allow this, just him to cross over, to get something to better the wetland or the town, or whatever our goal is, should we start making some criteria for us to follow? So that we can say to somebody like that woman, well, we gave this because this follows our plan to gain, it's just, you know what I'm saying? So we can have something hard and fast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we've kind of worked that
so we
every
have.
single time. When
Yeah.
somebody has to do a crossing, they've given us a mitigation area somewhere else, or carved off a parcel that they've restricted, or done a replication in.
Isn't it
And
just a blanket
Yeah.
approval?
And
Well,
yeah.
Kitty and I were discussing earlier today about having procedures that they have to follow, and let's say those procedures included saying that don't bother coming in with a plan for a new house, new driveway, and new septic, encroaching on the 50-foot buffer. If it's absolutely, and this policy or criteria or procedures could then say, if it's absolutely necessary, then you have to make a case in front of the commission to show why they should grant the waiver, and show enough mitigation to warrant that granting.
Right.
And they're already now on notice. Instead of someone walking in with a plan, plopping it into the 50-foot buffer and then say, oh, well, we're doing real good.
we're putting
for the-"
stormwater
Yeah,
in the 50-foot buffer as a mitigation.
To
I mean,
make
I
the
don't
water
even
That
know
go
goes
if
the
outside the
mitigation.
right way.
50-foot, yeah.
Well, it's supposed to flow into that anyway.
So
But
it would eliminate those
yeah.
right off the bat, because the
They
procedures.
know they have to design it.
right, I think that's
and
important.
with that lot right there, even though size of the house doesn't matter, okay, I understand that, but what you have to put with that lot, you have a driveway,
Right,
you have the house, shrink the house a little bit, so you can make the driveway work, and work within that lot.
well, that's why, it shouldn't be our job to do that, it shouldn't be our job to.
We-
Put
it
the
ends up
biggest house
being
you
our
want
job.
on
Yeah,
it, but as long as the
exactly. It ends
driveway
up being
fits in
our
right,
Yeah.
or fits in there just right, if you gotta shrink it down, shrink it down. You gotta make everything work right. Septic's gotta fit in there.
Right, and it's gotta
Driveway,
fit
everything.
out of the wetlands, it's just,
I don't care if it's right up to
Land
the
is
buffer of the
disappearing.
50 foot.
Right, if you want no yard,
As long as it's
fine.
out,
Yeah.
that's fine, but it's gotta work.
Yeah.
You can't just put half the driveway, cause
You
then you
can't
got
come
the
in,
snow
well,
plowing.
it's in the 50, and this is in the 50,
Then you
but,
got plowing the snow with the
Yeah.
driveway off to the side.
so that's in the
gonna
50,
screw
and then
it
5 years from now, it's further, and 10 years from now,
Yep.
Can I
Somebody's
go
gonna
back to
decide, oh, the
Mr.
driveway's
Adams
too
briefly?
small.
That was the fellow that was
Yeah, I know.
just
right,
here.
Yeah.
exactly.
He says it will devalue the land.
That's a common, it's a common comment. I don't know if that's right.
That's why
I hear
people
that a
don't
lot.
get what they want.
Yeah.
And there's always somebody who wants to buy a piece of property.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if they are aware that it's a conservation easement and they see the wording that you can walk on it, you can cut dead wood and so forth on it, but you can't develop it into a lawn or a swimming pool or whatever. If they say that, I like this, they're gonna buy it for the market price that is being sold. And then there's some people who are gonna say, no, I don't want it. And that's fine.
So
I
that
mean,
isn't really all within the 50 then, that he was showing us, I couldn't tell. Is that where we want the easement, is that within the 50?
Well, we were looking for the 50-foot, all that pink,
Yeah.
but his plan only went so far up here, so we didn't know how much farther it goes.
Yeah.
And I
He's showing
think my guess is it narrows down
It
to a
does.
point.
It does.
And it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller the further back you go.
So he's probably gonna have a little bit more up in here, but we weren't asking for that, but that's what he was showing,
Oh, yeah.
to make his
'Cause I'm
case
wondering
like,
if, so they own it but can't do anything, you can't go in it, you can't do anything in there, so what, you know? But apparently,
And to the point of value, if he can't cross the culvert, he has no value anyway.
Right.
So,
Right.
so,
This is pretty important.
you know, and that's important.
The
We have to.
culvert meaning the driveway.
Yeah, he keeps saying that he put it there, but still, it's.
But in the same sense, we can't restrict somebody from gaining access
Which is
to buildable
understandable.
land because there's a wetland there.
Yes. They just gotta follow.
They have to, right, they have to do a replication
Yes.
or a easement or
So-
consideration
so
for
That's that
encroach,
argument.
and that's,
Yeah.
so I mean,
How big does it have to become important enough to restrict the build?
as long as it's a buildable lot.
So it's about the amount of land that they can access as opposed to the amount of wetland that we would
Right.
lose. So the bigger the property takes more value takes the value away from the wetland? You know,
If there's more buildable land, but they have to replicate a certain amount no matter what.
Okay.
And if it's over a size, then DEP gets involved. If it's below it, it's just
Okay.
us. And this 5,000, and this is the,
5,000,
under the
okay.
5,000, so it's just an us,
Okay.
not a them. I mean, we could come up with, we ask for a 1-to-1. We could ask for a 2-to-1 if we wanted to
Really.
really go after it and say, we want more wetland created to save.
Well, I think we're all afraid of the new owner or the second owner down the road is slowly gonna move that.
Encroach.
That's because we've already seen it.
Yeah, we've
We've
cut
seen
and
this.
burned so much
We
lately.
mentioned the posts.
And so that was my thought, okay,
Yeah.
we'll offer it to you this way. Either you put the restriction on it, or you put the posts around the whole entire property, wherever there's
And how
the
is he
50.
gonna cover the culvert? Is that the impervious surface that he wasn't going to?
It's gonna be
Put a,
paved.
It is gonna be
Paved.
paved,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
got the runoff, so you lose the value of that little
Right.
bit. So what happens to the property now?
Yeah,
Where's
and-
the water that was getting used by that culvert? Where's
And
that
all the
going?
runoff from the driveway in the house is just draining somewhere, and
There's no conduit under the,
there is, I think
Yeah,
there's a,
I think they're
right,
right, yeah.
he's
so-
gonna put a
right,
conduit.
culvert to equalize if it does
Yeah.
get,
I mean, even if it goes off the driveway
Right.
onto it'll go into the,
right. And it's a single-family home, it's not like it's a commercial development with a huge parking lot,
what do you say?
but
Yeah,
you're
why
still,
is it about
you
6
keep
houses?
adding these up.
I didn't
and-
realize he said something about 6 houses.
Yeah,
There's no
I
way.
remember
He's
that.
got 6 houses.
No, he claimed he had 6 house lots.
Lots, 6
And-
lots, whether they were
lots.
buildable lots or not,
right.
that was a debate.
Right.
That would be right far from the beginning, no.
So there's no access other than this spot here to it, and so he couldn't get off the other end of it, it's all through a
That's why he
pond,
wants to,
basically.
okay, you can take around the side.
Yeah.
But this is pretty important to him, to get rid of this, I think, because, I mean, other than
We've
that.
worked with him.
Now, the point that Mo was making, you know, that if we are consistent, then I don't think we have any issues, and you're always open-minded, so that's another reason not to be concerned with your decision. But I think that ball is in their court now, and then they come back and
We'll see what they
show you what.
So if I have anything to say with, like, if this would be excused from it, can I go sit in the audience and then be as an audience member, or is that something I still can't even do, because like Tim said, you have to be in a butter to say something?
To say something? No,
To
no,
be- to make a
if you're not
suggestion.
in any conflict of interest, you can say what you want as a commissioner.
Yeah, so if I'm,
And see, technically for this one, you could have used the necessity clause and stayed within the hearing.
Just,
You could have excused yourself from voting, but still been a member
Exactly.
and stayed within the
Yeah,
commission.
you
That's
can
it.
do that.
Because,
because
You
if
can
I-
ask-
Ryan,
questions,
you
yeah.
needed the necessity
Yeah.
for the quorum and to keep the hearing and whatever, so, and you could just make the public disclosure that I'm gonna use the necessity clause, I'm gonna stay a
Yeah, vote
sitting
for it.
member, I'm gonna excuse myself from voting,
Yeah,
and just not be,
because I'm not gonna sit there and not say anything.
You
but
can
if-
ask
not take,
questions.
you can ask questions, you can still be involved, but you're not voting, you're accusing yourself from
FinCom
that.
has been like that on
Yeah.
several occasions where you have to recuse.
And I don't think the comment you made, and I can't remember specifically enough, I have to go back to the
About the,
video, but Azu saying that you were in conflict
yeah.
with the ethics.
To be part of the discussion, you said you couldn't have been.
I wasn't sure whether that was made at me too, asking
Well,
questions
that's
from the
other thing
audience.
too. I'm like, well, I know
And I
he's
was
in a
like-
butter, then all of a sudden I said something, and he's like,
Well,
You
he
can't say
said
anything
if
about
you
it,
recuse
or if you got-
yourself, you can't ask.
Like-
I think what
Right.
he's saying is you couldn't be part of the discussion with us.
No.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I,
That's,
You can't vote.
But you
right,
were
I
really
can't vote, I'm
directing the
not
question.
influencing it.
I
That's
was
the
not
key
directing
item.
it to them, but.
So we'll see where that all falls out. I'm sure that if it's,
And exactly, where is this being supposedly, the lot is? Where is it to you? Is it, looking on your driveway, is it that way, or is it?
it's to the left as you look down my driveway. So as you go past my house, past the
Is it
driveway,
where the old?
the old cart path's
pathway?
there, it's to the left of that cart
Just
path.
to the left of that one,
It's
So
the
it's
lot
toward
that's been
Bridgewater.
semi-cleared
okay.
when they did the perks.
And it's toward Bridgewater.
Yes.
Right, and they wanna just basically, looking at the plans,
I thought that
clear
was
cut the
all-
whole entire
I
lot.
thought that was all, June's and
No.
Ronnie's,
That one little piece is
but the car path is,
the cart path.
yeah.
And a side note, I wanted to congratulate you on your award.
Oh,
I saw
thank
you and
you.
John on television.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. I watched the
Oh, I
whole
wish I'd
thing.
seen that too.
Yeah, it's funny
Well,
because
it's on YouTube now,
okay.
so you can see.
good for you. That's great.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
You did a great job.
You made me tear,
Yeah.
tear up. I
Yeah.
was sitting behind you.
We have a couple things left. 373 Crescent Street, the enforcement order update.
so, the latest is that, I haven't heard anything back from the engineer when I explained to him to, look at his plan for some, changes that are necessary and to superimpose the former tree line on the plan. But in the interim, another engineer came in and discussed the project with me, and it almost sounds like the owner is considering switching engineers because of not getting the proper performance. And I don't know if that's the way it is, or it's just a feeler that was being put out to see if it's feasible for somebody else to be involved that can respond a little quicker. That's my impression. So, that's where it stands, and I know he's serious about it because he wouldn't have talked to another engineer and expressed his concern about, having started way back and not having a lot to show for it at this point.
Well, as we're finding out, engineers are busy. So, I mean,
Yeah. So it could be that way with all of them, and maybe this new fellow just says, hey, I'm not gonna be able to get to it any quicker either. So we'll see where that goes.
speaking of that, with this 53G that we're looking to hire, we're gonna end up with a problem there? Finding one to take it on if everybody's,
I don't think so, because that's kind of a
It's a
short,
review.
that's a short type of work,
I mean, so
whereas,
realistically, the Scotland Street thing shouldn't be much more work than,
No.
yeah, I mean, so I,
Well, we'll know in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
If nothing has happened, then
Right.
we've got to look
Yeah.
at another avenue, I think.
but I believe that a 53G should be able to respond fairly quickly and be able to get it
So
accomplished.
we don't bid that. I thought we bid 53.
No, I think some commissions might just come up with 3 names and 3 proposals and say, which one do you want?
some of the bigger projects we've done that with.
Yes. we
We've
did.
asked for
Yeah, I
multiple
remember,
proposals.
yeah,
but-
yeah.
But I think it's more important that the commission feel comfortable with their 53G and you pick the one, and if they don't like the price, they can object to it, and then you have to get into some dispute resolution on that. But I think for the most part, you have to feel comfortable with your consultant. And as long as the price isn't too far out of whack, and I don't know why he tried to imply
I know, I
that,
didn't understand. that.
I was gonna say
$10,000.
that, doesn't he? He knows that. He knows what's going. He knows what.
Why would we look to make anything more, I mean,
Expense-
we
yeah,
don't
we-
want, we're not looking for anything that's not ours, you know? I mean, it's just, I don't understand that. That was a little much.
Who was the gentleman that was sitting in the front?
I think he's, with the suit,
Attorney?
I think for Bill Adams,
Yes.
attorney for Bill Adams.
He came-
Possibly.
He came up as soon as he came up.
Okay.
I didn't say much.
All right.
55 Crescent Street? Update?
I'm trying to make contact with the fellow. He works a lot of hours, and I want to be able to meet with him, go out and say, this area needs to have some more plants put in it. And once we settle on that, then I think we can put the thing to bed. But I just don't feel comfortable with the fact that he's working so many hours and me just showing up and knocking on the door to his wife, who doesn't
Probably
speak
works, too.
English as well as the gentleman does.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to make her uncomfortable, so.
Okay.
FYI, just in case, just read it. We're not
Yeah,
like
I don't know whether anybody else got
Was this the
from
email?
Mac.
Yeah, I got that, yeah.
Good, everybody
Yeah,
got it.
about the
Okay. I can check
the extra
it.
bills and
Yes.
invoices
Yeah.
and spam that's floating around and.
And then I bought a couple of calendars from Mason.
Just two?
And we signed this. I have a question. I put in the agenda tonight all of the dialogue for the history of Adams, but that doesn't need to be in the minutes, because it's already in the minutes.
Right.
So like, all right, and can you email me a copy of your agent? Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that can be just referred to as.
Do we have a Mason's bill to sign?
Yes,
Signed it.
it went
Okay.
around, I thought.
Yeah, it's
I
going
also-
around.
I also have an invoice here that I want to have the commission approve. It's for $4,000. It's the cost of the demolition and disposal of the mobile home on River Street. And we are asked by a letter that we recently received from the Natural Resource Trust of Bridgewater to account for the $4,000 that was sent to, or awarded to the town to improve and provide access to the river at Pratt's Landing. So initially I'd received an estimate to remove that mobile home for $12,000. And in talking to Mark McLeod from Ramco, he said that he would do it. And in order to satisfy the grant, we have an invoice for the $4,000. It cost him more than that, so he's donating that other portion of his services and being paid for $4,000 worth of his services.
Kind of.
And I will give to go with the letter, because I did receive a copy of the letter from the granting authority to my home address, because they didn't have a
Yeah.
public email address. But if anybody wants to read it, that was what was requesting the final.
So what we'll do with the invoice is submit a pictorial report showing before, after,
We have
what
those
improvements were done at the property, how at Riverwalk the residents were picnicking on the property, how the grass was mowed and taken care of. And so I think that will satisfy, in my mind, the grant writer, or not grant writer, but the grant provider.
But we paid this gentleman, is that right? Ramco fellow?
This,
The what?
this is,
This
this is,
will do
This-
that.
this-
We haven't
It's
yet.
been all this
Right.
Not
He
custom.
did all this work and
It's been
He-
months,
well,
right?
he's not the. I've worked with him on other stuff, and he doesn't bill on a regular basis.
Oh, I see.
so-
He didn't even bill.
Right,
this is his
right. We
invoice,
haven't
so-
gotten an invoice, so we haven't had anything to
Oh,
pay.
I thought we were waiting for this grant to come in.
No.
no, in the letter, basically says, put up or
Yeah.
give us back the $4,000.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's nice. He's billing.
So,
May I have a little floor time?
yes.
Just a little.
You can dance?
This is an older grant. We received this money, or this grant award. Oh, I'm taking off my hat of your administrative secretary here, and I'm putting on my NRTB grant liaison hat. Because I did put in for this grant. We did get this grant in 2016. And it was one that you had suggested certain things for. John had suggested different ideas for it. People on the Open Space Committee had
2 years
suggested
ago.
different ideas for it. And we've had the money in-house for well over a year.
Okay.
The grant was supposed to have been completed, it was intended to have been completed
Oh, that's
by
a key word.
October of,
I don't think it ever
October.
said it in writing. I think what you said is true. It may have been intended to be, but I don't think you were ever told anyone that it had to be done by 2017.
No, that was part of the grant proposal, that it be completed by October of 2017, to be used by then. But because the town was in the process of buying the property, and it meant going through town meeting and getting that all certified, the grant maker was very understandable that there needed to be more time. And then with the winter time the way it was last year, the grant maker was again very understandable. To remove the trailer took more time. The challenge has been, this last year, of finally getting it taken care of, because the grant maker is responsible. He has to, the grant maker, I say he, but it's a group, they have to also document what they do with their monies that they get.
Sure.
And so this is part of the process, that you do have, when you put in for a grant, you have a proposal that's all done the way the people would like to do something. And the grant maker then agrees to it, but they have their criteria that goes with it. So it's not that you can, and they're very understandable usually, because they're usually people or groups that want to fund a project and they want to see positive results. Now, this is the same grant funder that we have gotten at least $15,000 from in the last 10 years. So they want to be able to work with us, and they're agreeable to changes that need to be made when they need to be made. But I wondered also, are we still going to have an annual meeting next month? I mean, the next meeting? You know how we,
Yeah, we'll probably do our dog
okay.
and pony show.
Because at some point, we should talk a little bit directionally, not a long time, because nobody wants to stay here any longer than they have to. But we should have some type of free discussion concerning, well, this type of a process, because this ended up with butting of heads, and it shouldn't have happened that way. So, it will be all right, the way it will come out, but we should have been able to do it quicker somehow.
And the big problem is, I think this group that gave us the money has federal dollars involved with it.
Yeah,
And
and so it's
Uncle Sam is
accountable
now
that way.
putting their feet to the fire that,
Mhm.
where'd the money go that we gave you?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
they've been generous to us, but we gotta get
Yeah.
their feet away from the fire and.
And we have it, right? The solution.
Right, I
is
mean,
in
it's been
hand.
done
Right,
and
yeah.
it's a legitimate project,
You
it
gotta
just.
show that we used it.
It has to be
Right, and
documented.
it's-
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I did not write this letter, which is contrary to what our learned man on my left thinks, because he thought it was so brilliant. And that's how usually my letters are. But on the other hand,
Who wrote it?
I will email my copy to people, because I got one also, just so you can see the language in here, and to understand that they still are looking forward to having a healthy relationship with us all.
Oh, good.
So,
No reason why they wouldn't.
Right, I just, when I got into my house, I'm like, oh boy,
yeah.
I'm like,
Very good. We got
Okay,
it.
I'm in
so
trouble.
What we need is for people to sign here.
What pocket did you put that in?
Sign here. And just know that this is part of what our growing process is.
You got one, okay.
I have pictures of the before and after on the trailer, John, so I can include them on this.
I think Attorney Kinahan is supposed to be responding
The who
to,
is?
You just
Attorney-
sign right here, and then
Selectman
Kitty will
Kinahan?
put that with the invoice.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
Is he going to respond
We'll be
to
overdrawn.
the land trust?
The finance committee will be
Good.
after us.
I recuse
Is it
myself.
back? Is it coming back?
Yes,
Where do we keep it? What kind of, in our general fund?
trail fund,
Trail.
there's a trail fund that's set up for.
All right.
Oh. Sorry.
Anybody have anything else?
I got a pen.
One thing.
Since he's not here, but we should mention that Steve Winters is celebrating his birthday this evening with his family.
And that's why he is
Happy
absent,
birthday,
so.
Steve.
Thank you.
Now I was gonna say happy birthday. 'cause
Right, I was
saw it
gonna
on
wish him
the
one too,
thing.
because I saw it on Facebook, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and he's not here
I'm
to,
like,
so,
He's watching.
birthday.
yeah.
It's when you take your birthday off. It's only another day.
It's a paid holiday.
It's a paid holiday.
Somebody
Thanks
was
for volunteering
upstairs
for
chiding the Board of Selectmen's administrative person today. You mean to tell me that you're not taking tomorrow off as a tribute to President Bush, or the late President Bush? And she said no, and he says, well, why not? Because everybody else seems to be, so.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm?
But that's dedication. We can still honor the president.
It's like, well, I shouldn't say it. It's like
Former
going to
president.
church. It's still.
It's adjourned.
Anything else?
No.
Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Whoopee.
We're adjourned.
So our next